time. One must feel sympathetic towards him, because it's not as though he's playing particularly badly. He's just not being allowed to play the game. He's serving pretty well, but almost the better he serves, the harder the ball comes back, and it's difficult to know what he should do. Of course, he's only one service break down. It's, of course, 5-2 always seems substantially more, but if he were able to hold on to his serve, and that's his first consideration right now, maybe he might be able to break the following game, and suddenly he'll be back into the match. But right now, his thoughts will be on holding his own service, and indeed he's had a lot of problem doing that. So the score is 2-5. Edmondson serving to save the match.
Well, the accuracy of this man is quite incredible.
15. All.
And that really is rather hard for Edmondson. A fine angled service like that, and the return absolutely almost impossible to get back. He made a gallant effort with the half volley. So 2 match points for Connors. Just out.
Set match to Connors. Connors wins by 2 sets to love, 6-1, 6-2.
Well, here's a man who really must feel absolutely right on top of the world. He won that match in 50 minutes, 6-1, 6-2. He really hardly put a foot wrong. Every shot that he played, he seemed to have command of. Just 2 or 3 unforced errors, no more. And remember, he was playing against a man, Edmondson, who is on the world computer at 18, and he was seeded number 5 in this tournament. The man who won the Australian Championship, beating Rosewall and Newcomb as far back as 1976. So a really magnificent performance by Connors. Mark, the only trouble, I think, is that, as I think you were suggesting earlier, he may well be running into form too soon, top form too soon.
Yes, I think that is a nice problem, though, to have to deal with. Obviously, the match yesterday against Hank Pfister was a good test for him. There is getting some complimentary remarks from his wife, and behind Jimmy Connors is his brother. But he certainly played absolutely superbly. The incredible thing was that it was perfection. It was winner after winner. There were very, very few unforced errors. And in fact, his opponent, Mark Edmondson, really didn't make many errors. He was just knocked off the court.
Well, what a devastating performance by Jimmy Connors once again. And how obviously keen he is to recapture the title he last won in 1972. Very happily there with Patty. He and his brother over here, she and Jimmy's brother over here in his corner. And The whole trio seemingly very relaxed indeed. And what devastation for that famous Australian, Mark Edmondson. Sitting beside me, another famous Australian who reminds me that it was 26 years ago that he won the title here himself, Neil Fraser. Well, Neil, the game has changed quite a bit since those days.
They seem to be playing harder, faster, and running quicker. I find it hard to believe the way Connors is playing at the moment that there's someone who will beat him in this tournament.
Well, let's just talk for a moment about the prospects for Wimbledon, because Wimbledon's, what, now 10 days away. You had a chance to have a look at a few of the chaps here, some of them not yet here, of course. Have you formed any impressions?
Well, I think one thing that worries me about Connors is that maybe he's reached his peak a little bit too soon. I find it hard to believe that he can keep this form really for about, it's got to be over 3 weeks. And maybe the rest next week will do him a certain amount of good, but I find it hard to believe he can keep this form. If he could play this type of tennis in the second week of Wimbledon, I think you've got probably, you know, as near a favourite to Wimbledon as possible.
Which he did last year, after all. I mean, that semi-final against Borg, by all reasonable accounts, he should have won it.
Yes, but I didn't see whether he played as well at this time of the year, John. That's what I'm referring to. I think a tennis player on grass should sort of work up to their peak, and I feel that Connors is maybe at his peak on grass. McEnroe is a little bit of an unknown quantity as far as I'm concerned, still with this ankle injury, his temperament and how he's going to handle the Wimbledon crowds and that. But of course, he's the obvious danger to Connors, and it's rather ironical that they're both left-handers.
Indeed. Talking of Borg just now, where do you stand on the Borg issue, Neil? You're an elder statesman.
Oh, well, I think that, you know, some people say you've got to abide by the rules. Other people say rules are made to be broken. But, you know, I have a little bit of sympathy with Borg and this issue, but I believe that, you know, if there's going to be a body controlling the game of tennis, that body must make rules, and they've got to make rules for everybody. And I'm afraid that if it's good for the 100th player, it's got to be good for the number one.
Yes, I rather agree with that. I mean, it's going to make a nonsense of things if you make exceptions, good as the player might be. It only occurs to me that there perhaps should be a rule that a player who is genuinely injured and genuinely wants to get right away from tennis should be allowed to do so without penalty.
Well, probably they'll look into that situation in this year, so that if a situation like this does arise in the future, maybe they'll be able to overcome it. But with the way the rule's standing, I'm afraid I have to go along with the decision that was made.
Well, now, John McEnroe, we've known, all of us, what happened last year, and everybody hopes that that won't be repeated, and that he'll have learnt something, and that all the officials too perhaps will have learnt something in how to treat the awkward situations that inevitably arise when he plays. But in sheer, pure tennis terms, surely this is a tennis genius.
There's no doubt. I find it hard to believe that a player can have so much control of the ball. He seems to be able to play any shot at any particular time. I mean, his touch with the ball on drop volleys, his touch on returner serve, and his ability to serve, in particular, the one wide in the first court. I don't think I've known a left-hander who could hit the ball so hard, so far up the line, as we say, and get so many in as McEnroe does. That, plus the ability to swing the ball down the middle, has his opponents in an awful lot of trouble in trying to return serve. And only a player like Connors, who is in the form he is, and maybe a big player who might be able to worry him with service, might be able to put that pressure on McEnroe. So, in other words, someone's got to play well on his own serve and keep that pressure on McEnroe trying to break serve, so that the pressure mounts on McEnroe and trying to hold his serve.
So indeed, if he is at the top of this form, if that ankle really has recovered, and it seems to me that he's moving fairly clearly and cleanly so far this week, you're really saying you can't see anyone to beat him?
Well, I think Connors, if the way he's playing in this form, if he's got to keep this form up, I think it'd be a great final if they can both be in their top of the form that they've shown here this week, in particular for Connors, and McEnroe gets back to the form that he played in the finals of Wimbledon last year.
Well, there we are. In fact, of course, it is McEnroe who is going to be coming onto this centre court now for his next match. But before we start that, it would be rather nice just to look at the way he finished off the tournament here last year. Remember, he was playing Brian Gottfried in what proved to be a very exciting final, and he's serving.